Modern science in the status quo is still limited by how much we can understand and control genetics, and thus many of the world's problems in medicine, for example, or biology remain unsolved, which is why we're so proud to propose. So first, some clarifications and setup then. In this debate, we're assuming that resurrection biology is possible, right? And also conservation remains the primary mechanism for protecting biodiversity in the present, as Erica will add on to later. So our stance is that there are restrictions regarding resurrection biology to occur, but we're simply freeing this. And resurrection biology is just a choice to turn to, not something that will happen in daily life, right? Also, we restore the food chain due to adaptability, and as I'll be adding on to in our second argument. So then our first argument is on environmental restoration will eventually lead to food chain break. So the premise is that biodiversity loss is not just losing species, but it also breaks ecosystems, and thus when species go extinct, important roles such as population control or whatnot will disappear. Thus this makes ecosystems weaker and more likely to collapse over time, right? We think that here conservation alone cannot fix this because it only protects existing species, not the function already lost. And this is the best possible solution and the most efficient solution we can provide in this situation. There are two ways to prove this then. Firstly, restoration of broken food chains through reintroducing species. So, resurrection biology brings back extinct species and places them back into their original position in the food chain, right? This means restoring predators or herbivores and other key species that control energy flow in the ecosystem mainly. So
You
once
are.
reintroduced, no thank you, once reintroduced, predators again regulate prey populations, right? Preventing overpopulation and ecosystem destruction. In addition, then herbivores once again will, for example, shape plant life in controlled ways, preventing overgrowth and maintaining habitat balance. So even smaller species like, I don't know, insects or pollinators reconnect plant reproduction to the rest of the ecosystem as an example. This directly repairs broken links in the food chain, restoring the full flow of energy from like one tropic level to another instead of having collapse or missing steps. The second way to prove this then is about rebuilding biodiversity to strengthen food chain networks. So resurrection biology also increases biodiversity by adding back lost species and increasing genetic variation. So thus what will happen then? This makes food chains more complex and interconnected instead of fragile and linear, right? Instead of relying on one pathway to survive, ecosystems develop multiple overlapping food chains where energy can move through different routes. This thus reduces the chance that one missing species will collapse the entire system. More biodiversity also increases adaptability, meaning food chains can adjust to environmental changes like climate shifts or diseases without breaking down completely. This leads to two impacts then. Firstly, on restoration of the full food chain stability. When missing species are restored, food species becomes complete again, and thus predator-prey relationship functions properly, which will eventually be preventing overpopulation and collapse cycles. Secondly, then this will lead to long-term ecosystem survival and resilience. With complete food chains and an overall high biodiversity, ecosystems become far more resistant to shock. Then our second argument is that in the developments in medicine, and thus if we overcome this thing, we can open up doors for other fields of science. So there are two ways to prove this. Firstly, advancement of genetic engineering and biotechnology tool. In order to recreate existent species, scientists must significantly improve genetic engineering techniques such as like DNA sequencing, right? And therefore, as these tools improve, they do not only apply to extinct species, but they directly transfer into human medicine too. This leads to two impacts. Firstly, it helps in modern medicine and treatment of sicknesses or diseases. And secondly, then there will be a faster scientific progress across many fields. This is why we're so proud to propose.
We believe that we should oppose resurrection biology as a distraction from the real issues. Instead of helping save animals that are already endangered, it pulls attention and resources away from protecting the species that are at risk right now. It also offers false hope because bringing animals back from extinction is very difficult and not guaranteed to succeed. Our goal in this debate is to show that resurrection biology is not a good solution for our environmental problems. We want to explain how this technology distracts us from helping endangered animals today and how it doesn't even promise to protect the species it tries to bring back. Moving on to the clarifications. What is resurrection biology? Resurrection biology is any scientific effort to revive extinct species through cloning, genetics, synthetic biology, or breeding modern relatives to resemble extinct animals. And what is this debate actually about? This debate is not can science do this? It is should humanity actively pursue bringing extinct species back into the world? Opposition says no, because we say that resurrection biology is ecologically reckless, morally distorted, and a massive misuse of scientific resources in a world where living species are already dying. So we prioritize conserving the animals that are endangered in the current society. We believe that these animals are the basis of today's food chain, and one extinction can lead to massive damage and gaps into the ecosystem. We don't think it is charitable for the government side to assume that their side can support both the preservation of endangered animals and resurrection, as the government has a limited amount of money in their budget as well. And moving on to the first argument, the premise is that resurrecting animals is very complex and does not guarantee that these animals will survive or thrive in today's environment. Even if scientists succeed in cloning an extinct animal, there is no guarantee it will live happily or reproduce successfully. So many extinct animals disappear because their habitats no longer exist or because they couldn't adapt to changing conditions. For example, if we bring back the woolly mammoth, it might struggle to survive in today's climate and ecosystem because the environment has changed so much that these animals might suffer or die, even if they considering these facts is
So
completely dangerous because it gives false hope and ignores the real challenges of species survival today. It's not enough to just bring animals back. We need to make sure that they can survive and contribute positively to their ecosystems. Resurrection isn't a simple or guaranteed solution. We believe that it might bring back animals for a short time, but it does not ensure their long-term survival or ecological balance. We need to focus on protecting the species that are currently alive and can adapt to today's environment rather than relying on uncertain and complex science. And moving on to the second argument, one of the biggest problems with supporting resurrection biology is that it takes attention away from the animals that are endangered today. Every year, many species such as elephants, tigers, and sea turtles face threats from habitat destruction or pollution and hunting. And the most important stakeholders right now are these animals. These animals need immediate help, and they can't just wait for new science to bring back animals that are already gone. Instead of putting money and effort into saving these animals, governments and scientists spending resources on resurrecting animals that have been extinct for hundreds or thousands of years. This is a distraction because it makes us focus on something uncertain and far away instead of fixing the urgent issues that are causing current animals to die. If we keep supporting resurrection biology, we risk ignoring the animals that are alive today and need our help the most. This could lead to more extinctions because we are not doing enough to protect those species that are already on the edge of extinction. Additionally, when these animals become completely endangered and vanish into the air, this will result in the ecosystem and food cycle to break down for the whole animal world. And we believe that that will result in impacting other animals as well. And this is the problem that both sides has to counter at the end of the day. And as we negate and oppose the usage of resurrection, we now have this chance to solely focus on the endangered animals. So as we use our resources and money to conserve the animals that actually need to be saved at the moment, we directly remove all the risks that might happen, which can include ecosystem breakdown and animals dying due to difficulties of adapting and so on and so forth. And that's the benefit we exclusively bring. They just can't prioritize that because they'll be focused on pouring all of their resources into resurrection and fail to recognize and solve the root problem that they should actually be focusing on. I'm happy to oppose. We believe that we should
This debate is not about whether extinction is bad or whether conservation matters. We already agree on that, and the question is whether human responsibility ends at prevention or whether it extends to restoring what has already been lost when capability is possible, right? So move on to the clarifications then. We want to say the opposition's claim that resurrection biology is quote unquote not guaranteed to successfully bring species back. So that's an impossible standard that no scientific field is required to meet in the first place. We said that we're not defending a world where every attempt success perfectly or where every single extinct species is restored instantly, but we said that this is a misunderstanding. We said that what we defend is the development of a capability that increases the probability of survival and restoration over time in the long term. We told you that also science is not judged by absolute guarantees and but by whether it expands and what is possible under uncertainty in the first place. By this standard, we said that even partial or conditional success is meaningful because it breaks the current absolute limits in science and also like the extinction, we can bring back animals as well. Their argument, therefore, is not true because into an unrealistic demand of perfection, we do not think this will work in modern science. Most importantly, we said that their framing just ignores the main idea in this debate. We tell you that resurrection biology is not a short-term benefit, it's a long-term restoration process, right? We said the relevant question is not whether it immediately solves extinction, but whether humanity should actually invest in the future where extinction is no longer permanently irreversible at that time when technology catches up. Therefore, we said in the long term, even low probability restoration is significant because it accumulates across multiple species and ecosystems as well, and technological improvements, which I'd like to expand later on as well. So even if success is uncertain in the short run, the value of the mechanism is that preserving the long-term development ensures that there's a better continuation, and that is why we're so proud to propose. We said that they cannot win this debate by arguing uncertainty or risk and risk because the motion assumes feasibility, right? We say that the real burden is to prove that a world where extinction is in principle reversible is worse than ones that are permanently finalized at the end of the day. Then with that said, I would like to move on to their extensions then. Firstly, I want to say that resurrection biology fundamentally changes the structure of biodiversity protection by adding the missing layer in the food chain that conservation alone cannot show, right? We said that right now, conservation operates under a strict asymmetry, so it can slow or prevent loss, but once extinction occurs, the system is just irreversible, right? That means that any failure in conservation permanently reduces biodiversity, even if the failure was small, accidental, or whatnot, unpredictable or whatnot. Therefore, we said that resurrection biology breaks this asymmetry by turning this extinction from as opposition assumes that this is a final endpoint, we said that we will change this to a potentially reversible state, meaning that ecosystems are no longer permanently locked into degraded forms once protection fails. Also, we said that even if restoration biology is never widely deployed for ecological restoration, it's still this development still generates irreversible scientific progress if how we understand or reconstruct or manipulate these biological systems develop. Therefore, we said that in the long run, like Evelyn told you, there will be other large benefits to other parts of science, and the mechanism is that biological systems share underlying principles across species, such as improving our ability to actually reconstruct extinct species directly improves our ability to repair the damaged human cells or whatnot. So we said there are a lot of connections within the scientific field, so that is why we want this to happen. And moving on to the third argument then about morality. We said that firstly, this debate is about what moral responsibility means in the context of irreversible harm. We told you that opposition treats extinction as a closed endpoint. Once the species are gone, the duty to preserve is further lost, right? But this framework is incomplete and wrong because it ignores how moral responsibility behaves in every other domain when the harm is reversible. Therefore, we said that future science makes the reservation possible, that the refusing even to develop the capability means accepting the permanent loss because it is necessary, but because we choose not to explore restoration, right? That is why we win, since opposition defends caution, but in reality they defend irreversible abandonment of repair even when repair becomes possible. So proud.
Extinction is tragic, but trying to reverse extinction creates a dangerous illusion that humans can endlessly fix environmental destruction after causing it. Instead of protecting nature, resurrection biology encourages humanity to treat ecosystems like laboratories. We do not want a vicious cycle of pointless resurrection opposed. Some rebuttals then. Firstly, on their point about how resurrection biology resorts biodiversity, as well as how their side can fully restore the full food chain, right? Biodiversity is not balance and interaction within ecosystems. A recreated mammoth inserted into a modern ecosystem does not magically restore the Ice Age ecosystem that it once belonged to, right? Many extinct species lost their habitats, their food sources, their migration systems, as well as their ecological relationships. So government side is not restoring nature, they are artificially inserting organisms into completely different environments. But also, we think the past is the past. The species are already gone and the ecosystem is working right now without them. The importance is in restoring and conserving the endangered animal in the status quo, because if they are gone, then the entire ecosystem is going to collapse, because right now the only animals left are the ones that are extremely essential to the current ecosystem. We cannot bear to lose them. Secondly, about how developing medicines and advancements of other scientific innovations can happen on their side of the house. We say that the benefits come from the technology itself, not the resurrection, right? Genetic engineering, cloning, and DNA research can already be used for medicine, disease research, and conservation science without reviving extinct species necessarily. We can develop scientific innovation directly without creating risky resurrection projects in the first place. Lastly, though, about how we are unfairly burden pushing them to prove the effectiveness of technology, right? I think government side misheard our case. Elo simply told you how we don't think it is charitable for government side to assume that their side can support both the preservation of the endangered animals and the resurrection of the government, that as the government has a limited amount of money in their budget as well, right? We already acknowledged feasibility. We simply said that it is not charitable for government side to try and take both preservation and resurrection with limited government funding. Now, with that said, then, moving on to our third argument about how resurrection promotes human arrogance over nature. Judge, resurrection biology changes the way in which society morally understands nature. Instead of seeing extinction as permanent, tragic, and something that we must prevent at the end of the day, people begin to see it as something that is simply reversible, manageable, and technologically solvable. This shift is very dangerous, right? Firstly, on the philosophical level, for most of humans' history, extinction and the loss of species has been seen as a hard moral limit. When a species disappears, humanity understands that we have failed to protect something that is irreplaceable. This actually creates urgency, guilt, accountability, and caution for the future, because once a species is extinct, there is no way to bring it back. Now the narrative becomes centered on the idea that even if species disappear, science can fix it later. This deters urgency, creates moral complacency, and gives the illusion of being able to fix and bring back species as easily as they were extinct. How does this actually change human behavior, though? Firstly, the governments become less pressured to prevent extinction. As already explained in Elo's speech, right now, extinction is politically powerful because it is seen as irreversible, right? Politicians then, on their side of the house, can justify environmental destruction by saying that technology will be able to restore biodiversity later on. This claim actively prioritizes our own greedy needs rather than the ecosystem's key animals that should never have gone extinct or suffered to begin with. Secondly, though, corporations usually actually gain a moral excuse on their side of the house, right? Industries actually causing environmental destruction such as mining or deforestation can use resurrection biology as a cover. They can simply say that yes, damage occurred, but future biotechnology can also restore lost species as well. Thirdly and lastly, humans actually begin treating life as customizable. Resurrection biology turns animals from naturally evolving beings into engineered projects, right? Scientists can decide which species deserve revival, which traits to edit, and how they should actually exist. This is when nature actually becomes nothing but human design. Why is this dangerous, though? All of this normalizes the belief that humans are entitled to redesign ecosystems however they want. That same mindset caused many environmental crises in the first place. Extinction carries emotional weight in the status quo because it symbolizes loss created by humans, but resurrection biology transforms extinction into a temporary inconvenience. Resurrection biology teaches humanity the worst possible environmental lesson, that no damage is truly permanent as long as the technology is advanced enough. We don't want nature becoming marketable rather than protected. Therefore, so propose. Extinction is tragic, but trying to reverse extinction creates a dangerous illusion that humans can endlessly fix environmental destruction after causing it. Instead of protecting nature, resurrection biology encourages humanity to treat ecosystems like lab.
The ecosystem is not working right now. If it was working, endangered animals would not exist. Eagles, foxes, snakes are starting to die out because not only of human civilization and the developments into natural spaces that they belong to, but because of secondary extinction. All of these animals are struggling to find vital nutrients from the food they need because of all these factors mentioned above, but if only we were able to bring back passenger pigeons, these animals would be able to survive and the food chain would once again be stabilized. Notice how these endangered animals are endangered not only because of the extinction of the previous generation of animals. This is a secondary extinction that we already tell you about through our entire speeches. These methods would be encouraged to use in urgent situations only, as an easy choice to turn to when there is no other solution for keeping certain animals alive. Moving on to direct rebuttals then, they say that this is a misuse of resources in a world where ecosystems are already dying. We reject this because it assumes the false trade-off between conservation and restoration, as Erica already stated. Conservation protects what still exists but cannot fix the ecosystems that is already broken by extinction in the first place. Resurrection biology, in comparison, is a targeted and last resort tool, as we already framed, where food chains have collapsed, meaning that it is not wasteful but instead corrective. But secondly, also they say that it is not guaranteed. Know this motion and this motion and the pace in which science is developing right now already assumes that bringing back these animals is possible to a certain extent. Also, scientists are very smart people. They are not reckless people who would bring back animals just as they were to the current society, as they know that environments differ. They would likely advance the genetics to be somewhat immune to the current situation. For example, by engineering cold-resistant species with woolly mammoth traits or whatnot, scientists aim to restore these grassland ecosystems of the Arctic, potentially slowing down its dangerous universe melting, and these genetic infrastructures will develop. But fourthly, they also talk about how we need to focus on the animals that are already alive and already existent, are already endangered. Take our very worst case and their very best case. We still do this better because I'm not saying that we are focusing on the endangered animals, but we are attacking the root issue that caused this endangered animals to become endangered in the very first place. The reason many animals are extinct is likely from secondary extinction. To be able to do what they want, to be able to pay attention and put effort into what is already endangered animals, you need to fix the generation before that. Moving on to my first class in integrated rebuttals then, when there is a climate crisis, who solves it the best? This comes in two folds. Firstly, the rebuilding of the missing spots in the food chain. The extinction of animals not only loses biodiversity, it increases the loss of biodiversity in an exponential form due to things like secondary extinction and coexistence. When one link disappears, it will destabilize the entire structure and the long-term habitat destruction, as Evelyn already stated, and this is why extinction is never isolated, but instead it spreads across ecosystem and weaken the entire food chain until the larger aspects of the system begin to collapse. This failure is also reduces ecosystem productivity, as it makes environments so far less capable of being able to recovering from the climate shocks. But secondly, about the scientific developments for the future and why it's more likely to happen and why it happens in a more effective way on our side. Scientists would likely not just bring back animals of their own form, as I said before, but add developments to it. Essentially, this opens up doors for scientific development with genetic technology to happen in the future. Animals are often the very base step to develop things for other things like humans. For example, you're able to alternate the certain genetics to humans in the future. But this also creates a spreading impact where breakthroughs are required for resurrection biology directly accelerates other climate solutions, because the same genetic tools are likely used to rebuild the species and can be reused for restoring the damaged ecosystems and improving environmental adaptation strategies. For these reasons, I'm so proud to propose.
Resurrection isn't a benefit, it's a harm that confuses already existing animals about their ecosystems and food cycles. If resurrection doesn't have a sufficient benefit, we don't think prop fulfill their burden, and if that's the case, they should lose. So proud to oppose. First clash directly on, which is about which side brings a better world for animals. When you build on a comparison, I think essential animals who are close to being endangered are far more important than animals who are already endangered. The past is the past, even though it's unfortunate that they vanished. Bringing them back won't cause any viable impacts because animals are already adapted to the new ecosystem anyways. I'm very proud to oppose. Under this, what did prop tell you? First of all, prop tell Judge, that's not true. Science does not work like that. In a status quo where animals are already adapted into the current food chain, bringing extinct animals back again does not nothing but create confusion among animals. Animals do not have an issue with an adaptation at the moment. They have an issue with preserving animals that might go extinct. If that's the case, rather than pouring our resources into resurrection and a system that does not have direct impact, it's better to use our resources into a viable alternative so that we can solve this problem that seems quite urgent. Second of all, the one-line response we heard from Erica is that we are massively overburdening them to prove the effectiveness of the technology. I'm just very, very unclear, Judge. This is not the problem of technology. It's the problem of how much scientific knowledge you contain in this motion. Let me make it easier for you. If an ice cream stays in the freezer for 72 hours and then you suddenly leave it out in the heat just because people don't eat it in the freezer, do you really expect the ice cream to keep its shape? Of course not. The lack of scientific mechanism proves to you the lack of scientific mechanization proves to you, Judge, that their impacts are very, very narrow at the very least as well. Their site also tells you how they can genetically modify responses to this. First of all, we see that this in and out of itself is not true resurrection. If governments needs to bring heavily alters the species so it can survive in today's world, they're no longer bringing back the original animal. They're just putting in weird things inside to create a new species. That's not a good thing. I don't think that's the correct meaning of resurrection at this case. Don't try to oversimplify your case. That doesn't mean that you're gonna win. But second of all, even if you become generous, this also makes ethical issues worse because now humans are not merely reviving species, they're just designing life, which is not a very good thing in the animal. That's not ethical. Let's not make this debate a very, very utopian debate. But what did our side tell you? First of all, from the start, we gave you a clear basis as to why it's important to conserve the animals that are close to being extinct, not the animals who are already vanished. We didn't stop there. We gave you several mechanisms and impacts such as breaking down ecosystems or telling you that there's just no purpose to resurrecting these animals because of the harm that they will bring, just at the very least under the fact that there's no viable impact that this will bring. Anyways, they told you this continuously. We didn't hear a specific response to this, we don't know why they're not willing to engage. willing to engage, so willing to win this clash. And if with this, I think with this in mind, I think we already brought the first clash home. But moving on to our second clash, which is about if past and present, if past and the present have a similar condition for animals to live in. One of the most heard supports from prop is regarding how resurrecting extinct species is going to just magically restore the whole food chain, and the impact seems to happen under the consensus that these species that were restored can just magically adapt to this new environment and change food chain. This isn't scientifically true. Animals are a species of adaptation, and without this being available right away, it will bring a lot of chaos. Not only will this be bad for these animals that were restored because they won't be able to adapt right away, but this gives a large confusion to the animals who are already living under a new ecosystem, and they're trying their best to conserve that ecosystem. That's not a good thing for these animals that are living right now. That's the point that we were trying to convey through the whole debate, that they don't seem to listen and they just try to oversimplify and overstretch our claims. Please don't oversimplify our claims. You don't know where this weird connection is coming from in the very first place. These are the scientific errors prop ended up bringing. I don't understand why we really need to take that in the first place, but they became generous, and we told you one by one why science doesn't work like that, and we told you one by one why ecosystem will rather break down when you follow propositions alternative, rather believe a side that actually can bring viable alternatives and viable impacts, just both were side opposition. Oh, and by the way, foxes didn't go fully extinct, and thus you can't just resurrect them proud to oppose.
Extinction is meant to be permanent. It is nature's way of telling humanity that some mistakes cannot be undone. But government wants to erase that lesson entirely by turning extinction into a temporary inconvenience solvable by technology. So proud to oppose. First question directly then about which side actually brings a better preserved ecosystem for animals. I think our WIP, DPM, and DLO and LO also prove this point enough. We focus on the most important and practical solution of protecting animals, right? Preserving and restoring ecosystems. Instead of getting distracted by the substantial in theory but uncertain idea of resurrection biology, and even if it's certain, we acknowledge to a certain extent that resurrection biology, we emphasize that healthy ecosystems are the very foundation for animal survival in the first place, right? And then the get-go. The Ella already mentioned that animals are dying today due to their habitats being destroyed, polluted, or changed by human activities, right? Our side made it very clear that by fixing these problems, by protecting forests, oceans, and wetlands, it is the most direct way in which we can actually save these species to begin with. And there is a practical solution that can be done now, unlike resurrection, which cannot happen on their side of the house or cannot actually restore these animals that are currently in the status quo that need restoring or like reservations. Now, moving on to second question then about on characterization, on which side can actually correctly portray the ecosystems of the past. Mostly because the society cannot sustain themselves anymore. Resurrecting animals is a very complex and does not actually guarantee these animals will survive or thrive in today's environment and today's environment and today's ecosystem, right? Even if scientists succeed in cloning an extinct animal, there's no guarantee that it will live happily or reproduce successfully. The ecosystem is not stagnant. It keeps on changing. Trying to force already extinct animals to survive is extremely risky and ethically questionable as well. We've rebutted to them telling you how they can genetically modify animals to adapt to modern environments and modern societies, right? We say that this in and of itself is not true resurrection anymore. If government needs to heavily alter the species so that they can survive in today's world, they are no longer bringing back the original animals. They are just genetically twisting them and modifying them. This also makes ethical issues even worse because now humans don't merely revive animals, they are just designing life by itself and in and of itself. And we say that that is extremely harmful. We do not want a vicious cycle of pointless resurrection, so proud to propose. Extinction is meant to be permanent. It is nature's way of telling humanity that some mistakes cannot be undone. But government wants to erase that lesson entirely by turning extinction into a temporary inconvenience solvable by technology. So proud to oppose. First question directly then about which side actually brings a better preserved ecosystem for animals. I think our WIP, DPM, and DLO and LO also prove this point enough. We focus on the most important and practical solution of protecting animals, right? Preserving and restoring ecosystems. Instead of getting distracted by the substantial in theory but uncertain idea of resurrection biology, and even if it's certain, we acknowledge to a certain extent that resurrection biology, we emphasize that healthy ecosystems are the very foundation for animal survival in the first place, right? And then the get-go. The Ella already mentioned that animals are dying today due to their habitats being destroyed, polluted, or changed by human activities, right? Our side made it very clear that by fixing these problems, by protecting forests, oceans, and wetlands, it is the most direct way in which we can actually save these species to begin with. And there is a practical solution that can be done now, unlike resurrection, which cannot happen on their side of the house or cannot actually restore these animals that are currently in the status quo that need restoring or like reservations. Now, moving on to second question then about on characterization, on which side can actually correctly portray the ecosystems of the past. mostly because the society cannot sustain themselves anymore. Resurrecting animals is a very complex and does not actually guarantee these animals will survive or thrive in today's environment and today's environment and today's ecosystem, right? Even if scientists succeed in cloning an extinct animal, there's no guarantee that it will live happily or reproduce successfully. The ecosystem is not stagnant, it keeps on changing. Trying to force already extinct animals to survive is extremely risky and ethically questionable as well. We've rebutted to them telling you how they can genetically modify animals to adapt to modern environments and modern societies, right? We say that this in and of itself is not true resurrection anymore. If government needs to heavily alter the species so that they can survive in today's world, they are no longer bringing back the original animals. They are just genetically twisting them and modifying them. This also makes ethical issues even worse because now humans don't merely revive animals, they are just designing life by itself and in and of itself. And we say that that is extremely harmful. We do not want a vicious cycle of pointless
We
resurrection.
already know how to prevent its extinction. The question is whether we should ever be able to undo it. So proud to propose. Firstly, move on to the three main issues in on-site opposition then. We said that firstly, opposition's entire argument relies on conflating restriction biology as a scientific capability with reckless, uncontrolled ecological interference, right? We said that that is not our model at all. We are not defending randomly restoring animals or introducing species without ecological justification. We explicitly defend a restricted or conditional framework where restoration only occurs in cases of proven extinction and ecological failure, not arbitrary reintroductions. So therefore, their claim about artificially restoring random animals and destroying ecosystem balance is a misunderstanding on our side as well. They say that past in the past, so they're focusing on the future, but we say that the best way to do what they want is literally to focus on the cases on why these animals are endangered in the first place, the secondary extinction, right? Also, scientists would not bring back animals just as they were in the past. They will likely put in genetic modifications that are feasible to survive in the status quo, and this is not quote-unquote immoral. That is what's likely going to happen in the status quo in the first place. Then lastly, why do we win? Like even if we take our worst case in our world and their best case world, we still win. Why? Because in our worst case, restoration biology is developed by heavily regulated, rarely used, or like only applied in extreme like extinction scenarios or whatnot. But in their best case, we have no restoration biology at all, meaning that every extinction, including preventable or human-caused ones, become permanently irreversible with no future correction possible. Right? That means that their world structurally guarantees permanent loss, while ours at least preserves optionality for recovery in the future. More importantly, even if we take their best case version of this argument, it still does not outweigh our side because they're effectively saying that because the adaptation is uncertain in some cases, we should permanently eliminate the possibility of restoration in all cases. But this is an extreme leap, and many conservation interventions already deal with species adapting to changed environments. And we do not reject conservation because environment shifts. We adjust the strategies in the first place. So proud to propose.